Welcome back from lunch. Already today, we've heard from a couple important groups of stakeholders for entrepreneurs and startup companies. We've heard from the investors, we've heard from the growers, and now we're going to hear from another interesting group of stakeholders, the large companies. The companies are interesting in that as a group of stakeholders, they represent potential advisors, potential strategic partners, potential customers, potential channels to customers, potential investors, potential M&A partners. And what the panelists joining me on the stage today will help you understand is ways that they look at technology, look at companies, how they evaluate whether your idea, your company might make a great opportunity for their organization to learn more about. My name is Roger Vanhoy. I'm Director of Corporate Relations and work with life sciences companies, a good number of which are the ag companies that are on stage today. And we work with all companies, but particularly those Fortune 500 companies. We really want to make this panel interactive, particularly with the MWin cohorts here. We want to provide an opportunity for you to ask questions of these panels because, as I mentioned earlier, this is an important group of stakeholders for you. Three panelists joining me on the stage. We have Simran Trana from Dowdupont, which as of this week formally rebranded her part of the organization to the agricultural, or Corteva, the agricultural division of Dowdupont, if I got that right. We have Barrett Mooney from the Climate Corporation, a Monsanto company, and then Greg Trame from GSI. So I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves a little bit more.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Roger introduced me, I'm Simran Trana. I'm with Corteva AgriScience, which is the agriculture division of Dowdupont. It's a new name for what we hope to be a new organization that comes from the merger of two organizations that have been in ag for a long time, Dow and DuPont, DuPont Pioneer. And really, the goal of the new company is to work with growers and consumers to develop a sustainable system of agriculture for generations to come. And that's really where we hope to take this new company, this new vision. So Corteva is not just a merger of two companies that's going to be the status quo, but our vision is to really take this merged company and the capabilities that we have to engage in a better way than we ever have with our industry before, and to be a real advocate and to represent industrial agriculture and growers and farmers, and also be more connected with consumers than we ever have been in the past. And as Iris was talking with the relationship with granular, it brings us much closer to the consumer than we have ever been before, both from a grower as well as the general consumer in the sense of people who eat food, right, which is everybody. So that's really the goal of the company. My personal role within the organization is working with our licensing and corporate development group, and I work with universities, small companies to put in place the agreements under which we work with each other. So that's my current role. Thank you.
Greg Trame with GSI. So for those of you unfamiliar, GSI is generally known as a grain company. So we are a manufacturer of grain storage, handling, and conditioning equipment. We are based here in Illinois. We are a worldwide manufacturer, manufacturing on 4 continents right now. And but we're also much larger than just what you hear with the grain side. So we do have an animal division specifically around poultry production and swine production. And then we are into the dry blend fertilizer as well as the seed business, so seed processing and that piece of the business. And then larger, we are one of the 5 core brands of AgTech Corporation. So in 2011, GSI was acquired by AgTech Corporation. So we have access to a much larger family of products and customers now. So we are excited to to be a part of this conversation. We are here in the research park as well with our ICO Acceleration Center, as Laura mentioned. So really starting to branch out more into technology in our industry and how we can interact with that. So excited to hear the questions today.
I'm Barrett Mooney with the Climate Corporation. So Climate is a digital ag data collection and insight generation platform, helping farmers derive insights from some of their data as well as some data from the industry. Everything from breeding trials to on-farm generated new sources of imagery and connectivity. And actually the new part of Climate, one of the new things about Climate that I kind of want to share to this group, speaking to the purpose of the panel, is something that Climate started called the Climate Platform. So for those young or old entrepreneurs in the audience that are developing tools and are developing insights, Climate is actually opening up its platform to host new company data. So we have partnerships, new ones we've created with companies like Cirrus Imaging or Terra Avion, and that's just on the imaging side. We have a variety of others, including in the grain marketing space, to sort of help growers get access to new technology slightly quicker, and to allow startup companies to take advantage of infrastructure that's already been built. So you don't have to build all your own new billing systems and marketing and customer acquisition projects. We basically can open up the Climate network to do that. Climate is currently on. I'm going to get this number wrong, so look it up on the website later, but I believe it's about 95 million acres, around the world, in Canada, South America. We're opening up in Europe. And prior to that, I have a doctorate in agricultural engineering, so I'm happy to be in good company. I noticed a lot of ag engineers in the audience, so that's good news for me. It's a long time when I get to use the word engineering and mean people who build things as opposed to write software. Nothing against software developers, but engineering is something else. And prior to that, I'm a recent acquiree of the Climate Corporation. So I was co-founder and CEO of a company called HydroBio for the last 5 years. And then last May, Climate Corporation acquired my irrigation intelligence and management company. And so we continue to run that division, or I continue to run that division within Climate, as well as our pest and disease product and our seed placement products.
Thank you. So when we extended the invitations to the panelists, we did it intentionally. We wanted Simran here to cover sort of the input, seeds, crop protection area of the business. Greg was intentionally chosen to really represent the more engineering device side of ag industry. And then with Barrett, the digital ag side. That said, I think you're going to hear some themes that are common throughout all of them. But to help set the stage, I mentioned a lot of different ways that companies can be a partner and stakeholder with new entrepreneurial ventures, startup companies. Can each of you describe the aspects of all the different ways I mentioned of interactions that your company is interested in engaging with the audience?
So it starts with the conversation we're having today, right? This is also a form of engagement for us, and certainly listening to people, really understanding where it's so many different ways. So like I said, starting today, then you can get to where we work with universities, like we have sponsored research agreements. We do small time investment in startup companies. There can be consulting arrangements with faculty as well as with small startups where we have specific problems. You come in and engage with us. Then you go through to licensing, mergers and acquisitions, and in the end, maybe also being a part of the organization and moving it forward. So there's a range of different options, starting with the very small conversation to becoming part of the organization, right? All of those are options depending on the technology, depending on what you need to be successful, and depending on what's the best way to get that technology to the customer who is eventually going to be the benefit from that. So wide range, and we're open to all of it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think at GSI, we've had opportunities come to us everywhere from a farmer walks up at a farm show with an idea for a product and finds the right person to talk to, and it starts from there. And that takes one direction all the way up to a joint venture or a merger and acquisition, which is a completely different thing. But I think as companies, we're looking for ways to better the business from any of those, and different ideas and opportunities that come in. You really choose not to ignore any of them.
Just to kind of add, all those things are exactly what Monsanto and Climate do as well. We run research protocols where we'll partner on early stage technologies just to see how they work on our research farms. We'll also create, if you're further along, right, adding to the platform so that you can engage on the climate platform and take advantage of our developers SDK or software development toolkits and develop on our platform if you're ready to start reaching out to customers. Monsanto does run a Monsanto Growth Ventures. We have a venture arm that invests in early stage companies. Hydrobio, my company was, we received a small investment from Monsanto early on, and then we also buy technology. I mean, as companies, we have needs as well, and so we'll engage with startups. My Hydrobio, my company sold products to Monsanto as well as a couple other large industry players. So it depends on what the company's working on, what problems you're trying to solve, and whether or not we see, our direct consumers have that same problem or we have that problem and it can be addressed. So there's obviously a variety of ways, everything from early stage research all the way through, sale of a product, not just sale of a company, to the larger organization.
So the first thing, lots of different ways to engage with companies, but from an entrepreneur's perspective, it all starts with starting that conversation. So Barrett, for the folks in the audience interested in approaching climate, should they be contacting you with a big, long, graduate thesis, a one-page, opportunity statement? How should that conversation start with you?
That's a very good question. You approach a big company like you would approach a venture capitalist, or even something simpler. It depends on if it's very heavily science oriented and you're engaging in science. But if you're talking about a product and bringing a company's product vision, I recommend 3 to 5 slides in a slide deck, 3 preferably, 2 if you can manage it. That not including your contact me information, and then corporations like Climate. Being a digital platform company, we have folks inside the company that are specifically built to handle this kind of outreach, that do tech development at that scale and work with companies and look at what early technologies are being developed. So finding the right person, do your homework. Spend your time doing your homework. Early advice I always got was look at a company, whether it's the VC world out there or larger companies, there may be 5 to 10 that really focus on your space. Find them, know who they are, and start to hustle for those, because spending your time with the 50 or myriad other people that are out there isn't going to get you results faster. It's going to get you a lot of meetings and a lot of conversations, but not necessarily a lot of results. So focus on the companies that have the same kind of market opportunities you're looking at, and then simplify your message. One pages are good. Slide decks are better. This may just be my experience, but working with VCs and working with big companies, a slide deck is something that's digestible. Hit them with 3 slides that are really good. Not a lot of information, really good value inside the deck of the proposition and a couple of pieces of tantalizing information, and that'll help the conversation go from there.
Anything to add?
No, I agree. I think if you can't get your point across in your mission in a very small amount of slides or one page, the people probably aren't going to take the time to read it, and it's going to get buried on someone's desk and never really go any further.
The only thing I would add to it is do quantify your opportunity in that brief conversation that you have. It's not enough to say what it is you can do, but what is it worth? That is a really important piece of information.
So Simran, you mentioned that you work on agreements. Our entrepreneurs in the audience know that their intellectual property is important. Should they be asking for a confidentiality agreement to start the conversation, or when does that come about?
As late as possible from our perspective. So that's, it's intellectual property is a very nebulous thing. What is it? What embodies it? When do you disclose it? I think those are all very different. They mean different things to different people, and it's very difficult to really understand what's critical. But you have to understand that as companies, we work on so many different things, and that we are looking at so many different opportunities. We really don't have time to work on ideas that don't have the funding and the project and the people to pursue. So most of the time when you come to us, and if you want us to sign a confidentiality agreement before you will disclose anything, we just don't have enough information to say we even want to have that conversation. So at least help us understand the opportunity, the size of the opportunity, And you need to get somebody interested and engaged enough to want to find out what it is, right? What is it, that secret sauce, or what is really the confidential information that makes your company work? You need to get people to that conversation to the point where they care. And you need to understand and figure out a way how you're going to tell something about what you want to do without disclosing confidential information. I think that's the first thing you need to figure out, because it's going to be very difficult to get into the door if you insist on having a CDA before you will talk.
Any further comments?
Just to go back to that, the slide deck sort of pitch, nothing in that deck should be confidential, right? I mean, you should be able to talk about the market opportunity of your project, product, research without disclosing a formula for anything, right? An algorithm, you don't even have to put in your patent filed number. I mean, none of that stuff needs to be in there. We have a lot of stuff going on at big corporations. From personal experience, it's not like Climate couldn't have decided to develop an irrigation management tool. The reason they partnered with HydroBio and eventually acquired HydroBio had to do with the fact that we could do it better, faster, lightweight. We want to see innovation out of smaller companies. We can't afford to focus on everything, so we want to encourage companies to do the best they can to focus on it. We just want to hear about it early. But it's about hearing about the opportunity and hearing about the project without hearing about the nitty-gritty details, right? We're not quite interested in the math at the early stages of discussion. So, treat it like you would treat venture capital pitches. Venture capital pitches are practically never confidential, right? That's how venture capitalists learn. No offense to the venture capitalists, it's a great strategy. Have people come in, they educate you about the industry, and you can pick up a lot from doing that. Big corporations do the same thing. So it's a matter of those meetings aren't confidential. Neither would the early stage meetings with a large corporation until we get to an agreement that might be negotiating for research or for something else.
So Greg, let's say our faculty or entrepreneurs are at the Farm Progress show and approach you, get a conversation going, you agree to take a slide deck from them. What is it that GSI looks for at that early stage as it's evaluating whether to set that first meeting?
I think one of the key things is, us as more of an equipment manufacturer, not maybe as much as a technology company, but just understanding what is the path from where they're at today to where I scale that into something for my business that I can do something with. So make sure that information that you're bringing clearly shows that path, because if I can't draw the conclusion to that path to profitability and what the product is, I'm probably not going to give it a second look.
Simran, any question?
Large corporations, as you can imagine, tend to be somewhat bureaucratic organizations, right? So you have to get somebody to become a champion for your technology, because it's going to take a lot of effort to get that corporation to invest and engage. And again, depends on what you're looking for. If it's just something small, a brief conversation, or you're just looking for some input to vet your idea or to help grow it, I mean, that's something we do as well. If you're looking for, it's a great idea, it's not a place that we're going to go, and it's not a core part of our business. We have a lot of people who want to give back and want to just be consultants or work with you to help grow the idea, especially if you're an alum. Being here at Illinois, having this kind of group, there's a lot of people at Corteva who have affiliations with Illinois, and they might want to just work with you. So that's one part of it, right? But then the other one is if you're actually looking for investment, again, make sure that you clarify how and why we should care about it, and then find that champion that's going to take that forward. Because it's going to take a lot of investment and pushing within the organization to bring that idea inside and invest it and grow it and develop it.
So Barrett, at Climate, what advice would you give our entrepreneurs for trying to find that champion?
The champion really comes from your homework, right? I mean, you got to put in the time. That's part of being an entrepreneur. You got to put in the legwork. You got to do your homework. You got to know who at the company is focused on the areas you're focused on. If you're focused on a new type of gene editing, you need to know who in the company works on those projects, especially at different stages within the company. They're bureaucratic organizations. We have hierarchies. We have places and levels where the people are executives at the point where they are too busy, and although they came from a gene editing background, let's say, they haven't looked at new technology in a very long time. They're mostly balancing P&Ls and doing lots of other management tasks. So you have to sort of know the structure of the organization, do your online homework. Most of the time we publish those sorts of things. We as large corporations try to be as transparent about some of those things as we can. LinkedIn is your friend. People have published research papers. They have been professors at universities. All of that stuff is in LinkedIn profiles. And they may now be at a large corporation and they have an expert in, NPK Lyme applications, and you've got a great new way of measuring those things. Well, someone who just came out of a university segment joined Climate Corporation. We have one, currently he also ran a company while a professor and has just joined Climate. He's a great guy to engage with because, I'll go ahead and say his name in case you're working on MPK Lyme. It's Dr. Jorn. I think he came over from Purdue, actually. Great guy, and he is a champion. I mean, he's championing from companies that we had never heard of at Climate. I was in a meeting with him yesterday, and that was, part of it was, hey, we're looking at something, we need to bring this partner on our platform and do things with that. It's really all about doing the homework, knowing who came into the organization, at what level in the organization, and what their focused interests are in developing technology, and then that can sort of go from there.
So as I mentioned at the outset, really wanted to make this an interactive session. So any questions from the floor? Particularly for the MWin people, I'll go into professor mode and have Jed call on you if we're not going to get questions at some point. This is your chance to, a captive audience of 3 industry-leading companies and folks within those companies who are that interface with entrepreneurs and new technology. So this is just a wonderful opportunity to get some of those questions answered.
And Roger, if you don't mind, I'd like to actually put in a plug for venues like this. I think it's worth your time to come and attend, because you're going to see people here. Otto Folkerts, who's with a colleague of mine, is here. And ask those people, who should I talk to, or who is it that's an expert in this industry? If you know who you're looking for, ask us when we are here, and when you can get a hold of us to say, can you give me a name? Can you connect me with someone? Instead of just saying, this is what I have. Be very intentional about what you want. That's
amazing advice. There's nothing better than a warm introduction to start a conversation than just a cold call. Well, it looks like we may have our first question.
So you said that an initial discussion, NDAs don't apply, and that the technical details obviously don't come out at that point. And there are probably a bunch of little entrepreneurs around here thinking of one of the horror stories of small entrepreneurship, which is Ford and the variable speed windshield wiper, where the person who invented it had to fight for 20 years to get Ford to pay for it, because the idea of that, Ford then went off and independently re-engineered, whereas disclosure of the idea immediately, that's the whole ball of wax, because once you figure out that's what you want to do, the circuitry is easy and so on. So what do you do when there's that fear factor? Because some little person isn't going to put variable speed windshield wipers on the entire car fleet. On the other hand, if someone who has resources is going to, for whatever reason, and let's not go putting ideas into other people's heads, for whatever reason, are positioned to exploit just the idea, how do you balance, how do you overcome the fear of that imbalance?
Domino and the sugar packet, right, is another good example, right? That came from somebody pitched Domino, hey, we should invent this thing called the packet and put the sugar in there. It's single serving, and Domino went, thank you very much for the idea, right? It has a lot to do with the difference between an idea or a technology and a business. an idea and a technology that aren't a business can happen. I mean, I'm one of many people that would say, look, ideas happen and they're a dime a dozen. They happen 50 times a day. And a good idea is not always a good business. There are lots of ideas out there that it's just that. It's a business. If you need a larger corporation, in the windshield wiper example, like Ford, to make your technology valuable, the idea itself, it should have been patented long before you brought it. If you never had the ability to bring it to market and market it yourself and put the product on the market, and license a technology that you owned, then bringing it to Ford could be sometimes a mistake. It sort of depends, again, on how you approach the company. I mean, we're not generally looking to steal ideas. That's not how we operate. Our reason for taking meetings is not brain drain. We take meetings to learn, and we take meetings to be helpful. But at the end of the day, there's a big difference between approaching a big company with a business, that you have a business to sell a product, and that includes a technology, versus approaching them with, hey, we have this great technology, but without Monsanto's billions of dollars, we would never get it to market. That's a different type of opportunity and approach, and you may want to spend some more time incubating, protecting the idea, fleshing out a potential business plan instead, before you start to approach a large organization for it.
And I would say, if there is fear, as the entrepreneur, protect yourself. A provisional patent filing is very inexpensive. So if you have that idea, get that provisional patent filed, which you can do with very little information, and you've at least started the clock on protecting yourself at that point. I know when we work with companies on things like that, ideas or specific products, we encourage them to protect themselves before they walk in the door, because we have a whole group of engineers that might be working on the exact same thing at the exact same time. So if you're concerned, protect yourself and get your patent filed, and the rest of it really should take care of itself.
And there are, I'm not sure about here locally, but there are some small business, like innovation research centers, or, there are usually within a city programs set up to help you find the resources to do those things. It isn't that expensive. It takes a little bit of legwork. Sometimes it's hard to shuffle things around. A lot of it's legal speak, but that is worth taking advantage of those city and state resources to do those things, because they're hoping you develop technology into businesses. I'm sure the university has ways of helping and professors and students protect ideas. So take advantage of those free or subsidized services in order to be protected, so that when we go for a longer deal and we start to think about, launching businesses or buying products from you or acquiring your company, we know we're acquiring something solid. We're not acquiring an idea. We're acquiring patents that are being filed. We're acquiring a team. Those are the real things that we want to buy at the end of the day.
Roger, I guess for the panel, one of the things that we would like startups to do in many cases is figure out an early pilot with a bigger company, and pricing that and figuring out the structure of that can be challenging, whether it's really a joint development or if it's just an early customer agreement to do something on a pilot basis that is the first proof of concept. Can you talk a little bit about how you look at structuring those types of agreements versus something that's more complicated, certainly like mergers and acquisitions and more formal licensing? Thanks.
Well, in our side of the business, which is much more technology driven, like, we're in the crop protection, we have new active ingredients that we bring to the market, or we have seed technologies. Those are a lot of times milestone driven. So depending on milestones as we hit, there can be success fees, there can be an upfront fee. Those are all options and probabilities. Most of the time when technologies come to us in my area, which I'm talking primarily crop protection and seeds now, there's a big regulatory framework around our industry where things have to be registered, and it may take anywhere from 8 to 15 years to get through that registration pathway. So we do have milestone-driven sort of payments that we tie to the successful sort of evolution of the product along the value chain. So there is opportunities to participate in that product as it moves along in the commercialization journey, but typically those are the kind of arrangements we'll see. Now, when you're talking about, I think a lot of the technologies, what I see represented here, I'm going to let Barrett and they may be able to address that more clearly. Yeah,
I mean, again, it really depends on, is it a product or is it Is it an idea and technology? If it's a product, we have a structure at Climate in Montana. We have research farms that we control. We own or license the land, lease the land, so that we can grow corn as intensively as we decide to. Generally, it's corn. Sometimes it's beans. But where we'll put technology on, and we'll try and see how it goes, and we'll compare multiple technologies and kind of pit them against each other. Those agreements are fairly standard, what we call them research protocols. And getting a technology in a research protocol is as easy as find a champion within the company that says, hey, I want to submit a research protocol idea. We generally do those late around harvest time, early fall. We start to get involved in, hey, what's the next suite going to be? We develop the protocol, find out what it's going to cost. Occasionally, entrepreneurs can take advantage of some financing. A lot of the time, we're hoping that you can provide the technology at no cost, because what we're going to deliver back to you is a comparable of how your technology did versus, some, in the case of water, I apologize, that's not anybody's focus probably in this room, but it was mine, like a soil moisture probe versus a remote soil moisture monitoring tool like ours. We did this where we basically provided the tool for free, and we got a comparison back of how well did it prove a yield value, how well did it prove an efficiency gain, whatever the technology value prop is. And so we got an independent research done. I mean, we didn't have to pay to be a part of it necessarily. We had to just put up our product. It got written into a proposal that got fed up the chain. And so sometimes it can be as easy as that. If the product's ready to go, ready to ship, if it's an idea and an incubation phase, there's or like a genetics play or a chemistry play, those things are a little different and do require a whole lot more paperwork, from my understanding. I'm not as familiar with them, but they do require a little bit more legwork overall.
So Greg, a company brings you a new technology, they tend to be focused on the underlying science, engineering, software, what have you. A lot of the feedback they hear from companies is framed in terms of risk. Can you talk a little bit about what risk means to GSI and the implications for engaging with entrepreneurs?
Sure, especially in this product or idea development phase, mitigating risk is what I spend a lot of my time doing with our engineering department, and so depending on the stage at which this idea or this product is in is going to determine a lot of what that risk is. If it's something finished, polished, ready to go to market, we're still going to have to do the things that we take our products through, product validation. And I think that's one of the biggest hurdles, that if you're bringing a product to a large company, that you're gonna have to be prepared to deal with. There's a lot more strict rules and regulations around, as we take this product out to a mass scale, that risk that we're gonna be willing to accept, that it is gonna work in the marketplace. So be prepared that things may slow down slightly compared to what you're used to as a startup, but what I would also say is value the input that you're going to get from the company that you're trying to partner with, because you went to them for a reason. They bring a different skill set than what you may have, but also push the boundaries of what you can do from validation, because it may not be the same thing that they're used to. So feel free to push them, but also respect that, as you mentioned, we tend to be big bureaucratic companies, but we do have some rules that we have to play with when it comes to taking that product to market.
So there's liability risks. Simran, what are some other types of risks that you think about when you're dealing with a small company?
Well, liability is product related. I mean, there's also how committed are you to taking that technology to market? Like, if we're going to make a big investment, how much effort are you going to put into that? Just that sweat equity that you put in, we put in at our end too. So we want to make sure that you're going to be a long-term partner. Do you have enough sort of funding to sustain the kind of activities that you commit to doing? Is that really going to be something that we're going to be able to follow through on? That's another part of it. Is what else? Anything else you can think of?
Well, there's brand risk, and this is actually something that as startup companies you should exploit. We, as big bureaucratic companies, we have a reputation, we have a legacy, we have a brand that we have to protect, and there's a tremendous amount of risk for us to launch a product that we aren't, ready to go to market with, because if we launch a bad product, we suffer, and in ag especially, with the way market adoption rates are, you have a serious long-term risk of getting bad brand equity out there. So or brand liabilities. So that's a tremendous risk that we as big companies have, that we have to bake things all the way through. Startup companies, you guys don't have that, and exploit that. I mean, you guys can release a product, code got pushed 2 a.m., farmers are using it 6 a.m., so what? Go for it. You know, you've got at some point really nothing to hold you back from doing that. You don't have 3 layers of code Q&A and testing. You know, you can push the hard work through as fast as possible, generate results as fast as possible. That is something that as large corporations, we're never going to be able to do. And as a matter of fact, we don't want to do it, right? We're going to take advantage later on, and everybody wins of startup advantages when we acquire companies that have been taking those risks and succeeding, because that's the difference between failing fast and you know, failing badly. But failing fast really generates, hey, you took it, you went for the risk, you immediately corrected it, you took another risk, you corrected it, and you falter, but you falter for such short periods of time because you're willing to hustle the turnaround time. And so although we have brand risk, most startup companies don't have a brand. Great. Take advantage of the fact that you don't have a brand and outwork everybody else.
I think there's a couple of other pieces that just come to mind. There's the IP risk, which is, you know, is something out there that you haven't seen or we haven't seen yet that's going to show up by the time we launch. That affects evaluation to some extent on our part, because you have to factor in time and what that's going to bring. And then regulatory risk in our industry is a large part of what we have to think about, you know, for a technology, particularly when you're coming into ag, whether it's a crop protection chemical or a seeds product. Think about the regulatory pathway and how your technology may impact or facilitate or negatively, positively, the getting through those regulatory hurdles to get to a registered product.
Question?
Thanks a lot for the panelists for sharing these experiences. My name is Ran Chao, the co-founder of Life Foundry, a small startup here in the UI Research Park. My question is for large corporations like yours, evaluate technologies like ours. Who are the parties involved? What divisions within the corporation are involved in this evaluation process? And who is really the driver for such a process? And usually a site visit is expected. Then what are you looking for when you're visiting these startups? Thank you.
Well, there's the technical aspect of it. First and foremost, if it's a technology we're looking at, it's vetted by our technical teams to say, yes, this technology can solve this problem, right? And then you're looking at the people who need, how big is the financial investment, right? If it's an annual recurring payment, it's manageable within, you know, the division of a small division, then the decision is made at that point. If it's going to be a multi-year or a larger investment, again, it also depends on the dollar amounts, right? Depending on the stage at which that decision needs to be made, you know, if it's $250,000 investment a year, maybe it's a division leader who runs, you know, that particular operation, he can sign off. You have to tell people what you're doing, but you're not asking for sign-off or permission. As the dollar amount goes out and the length of time goes up, you start getting more people involved, right? So one way to think about it is, how do you structure this initial engagement where you can get the decision point as low as possible in the organization to at least sort of do the proof of concept, get it vetted, and then start moving it up into a broader, bigger relationship.
Yeah, because as the size of that gets bigger, you're now talking many more aspects of the company involved, and that will only slow things down. When legal and finance and engineering and everyone else is in the room, the process is just going to get drawn out significantly longer. But if you can find that person that can champion that, it can help. But again, that's going to depend a lot on the company that you're taking it to as well. Because I think you'll find in a smaller company you may meet with the CEO, and in a big company you're obviously not going to probably be in a room with the CEO. So it greatly depends on understanding that company that you're taking that idea to.
Those are all good answers. Yeah, the champion is really the key, right? I mean, global procurement processes, legal, your champion will walk you through all of that, and they'll pull the people in the room. A couple things: you need to be patient. Companies move slow. You gotta work with them, give them the information they need when they need it. Don't expect an immediate response, but Yeah, a lot of the time you can start, I mean, at Climate as an agronomy insights company, we start at the science level, right? These research protocols, they don't need approvals. We have a standard kind of form, which of course your legal teams or student legal teams or whatever could review, but they're pretty small. They're, 2-3 page legal forms like that. All of that is really, it doesn't have to go through the Climate legal team and all that. Those are the easy ways to get started. Generally, you always want to start small. Only because your reputation will grow the bigger you get rather than trying to bite off more than you can chew. A startup company approaches a big company the same way they approach a customer. Under promise, over deliver. Every time. Over promising and barely delivering, or over promising and under delivering are They kill companies every day. And so while I will temper my last comment about risk, take the risks, do what you have to do to cut corners in order to get products out the door and to keep happy customers. Make sure when you promise, you deliver, and preferably over-deliver every time. I mean, come out with a new feature at the time you promise somebody some other feature, and doors will open, because it's really about the team that can do that. And as corporations, when we look at doing these research or partnering or using company technology, we are just as much as a venture capitalist looking at the team. Can the team deliver this product? I think Simran said it earlier. There is a question about longevity. Are you going to be around long enough for us to utilize this product? I think from the startup side, you're usually thinking, well, as long as you continue to use it, we're going to be around. But there is that broader vision that you all would have to have as a startup to say, no, we're going to be around regardless of this partnership and have the confidence to be able to continue to deliver.
So to go a little deeper on this, are there better times to approach you as a large company? I mean, do budget cycles matter? Do fiscal years matter? This is an industry that plays into the growing cycle. Does time in the growing cycle matter, or is any time a good time to start a conversation?
Not between Thanksgiving and New Year's. Nothing happens. Startups, we're all sitting there at our computers. We're trying to figure out why nobody is. But that is a bad time. I mean, just as a flat out, I'm sure corporations can agree, like that's just a bad time to try and get a lot of feedback.
I think budget cycles always matter, because without the funding, none of these projects are going to go anywhere. So one of the things that I would say, again, it depends on the size of the company that you're bringing this idea to. If it's one of the really large companies, they may have budgets always set aside for things like this. Smaller companies may not. So it could be, do your homework around that company that you're going to and look at their investment pattern and see if they've done something like that. Because if it's a smaller company that has to get approval up the chain to fund something like this, then if you weren't in the budget, you're probably not going to be until the next budget cycle. But a larger company, I'm sure DuPont, you guys have money set aside for this type of things that you might be able to squeeze it in. I know at GSI, it's probably going to be a lot more challenging to get a large investment in if it wasn't part of our budget cycle.
But even for Corteva Life Science, we may have that agri-science, Corteva agri-science. Got to get used to it. We do have budgets, but they do get committed. And so if you look at our funding cycle, we start thinking about things in November. We wrap up the crop year, particularly here in North America. We look at all that happened. We look at the sales cycle. We look at our research cycle, see what comes out of it. And then we start planning for the next year. What are the problems that raise to the top? What are the problems we need to solve? And by February or March of next year, we're starting funding the research or the technology we're going to start exploring. And then you go through the whole sort of planting cycle, then you're back through July, August, and you're going to reevaluate it. So that's really, think about it as an ag company. Whatever country you're working in, the planting cycle drives our business cycle. And that drives our investment cycle. So that's just what you have to think about.
That's exactly what I was going to say, right? We're ag companies. We have the same industry cycle generally where we are. If you have a technology that is portable to the Southern Hemisphere, keep in mind you can get a lot of traction if you're ready to go with a proposal in July, for the Southern Hemisphere planting season. But generally we're operating at that point around evaluating what we already just committed to back in January.
Yeah. This is the time for major corporations to merge. Monsanto Bayer, okay? What is it, Syngenta, China, Dowdupont. What happens within the corporation when you have previous processes underway and there's a merger? Should we recontact the people we've used to work with, or at least the divisions, if you could give us some background?
Certainly, and you know, people have moved around a lot. With our merger, which closed in in September, and then by December, we all found out what our new jobs were going to be. And probably half of us kind of kept doing what we were doing, and the other half have completely new jobs. So what I would say is, if that person that you worked with is still with the organization, which doesn't always happen, they would be the perfect person to ask who is taking over your roles and responsibilities. So please do reach out when you see this kind of merger. Just check in with your contacts to say, are you still doing what you're doing, or is it someone else, before they really kind of move on. I would encourage you to do that.
So I'm going to take a question that was asked of the investor panel and turn it on you guys. What do you see as trends for each of your sort of technology areas, companies that you are particularly interested in? And conversely, are there any things that are not resonating anymore?
I think the piece that was mentioned this morning around the labor shortages is important for us in our space, both raising animals, storing grain, moving it. We need to make our equipment, our facilities be able to do what they need to do with fewer qualified people managing them. So we have we have a lot of things going on in that space now, working towards that almost that autonomous farm that we can manage that type of situation, because this qualified labor shortage doesn't appear that it's going to disappear anytime soon. So that's really a technology area that we're spending a lot of time and energy in.
And then anything that you're not particularly interested in?
I don't think so.
Just on the climate side, what we've been really interested in is kind of what I was plugging earlier. I'll plug it again. Is this platform play to kind of answer that question with something that was on the farmer panel. Our next what we're really excited about, our next big move is to try and commingle as many compatible technologies and incompatible technologies as possible onto a single platform. That way, if you're a grower and you're using Terra Avion aerial imagery, you can get that inside your field view account. If you're using satellite imagery from another company, you can get that inside. If you're using Case or Deere, it doesn't matter. Maybe you're a Volvo guy. I don't know. You can have some yellow paint on the farm somewhere. It doesn't matter. We want all of that in one place to allow connectivity and allow small companies, big companies, medium-sized companies start to interact and help growers in different ways. We can't be experts at everything. So we expect this platform to allow the farmers to gain access to the technologies they already like to buy. So interconnectivity is big for us. And of course, we've got a lot of really smart people at Climate, so we've got a lot of really interesting focuses. Like we've got some robotics focuses, just we're interested in that stuff. We like it. Smallholder farming focuses, bringing technologies that are simple to use, SMS-based, candy bar style phone or flip phone style, agronomic insights. How do you start to engage in emerging markets? We have a Farm Rise program going on at Climate. So basically anything up and down the supply chain, but interconnectivity of devices, that's very big for us right now.
And for us then, in the crop protection and seeds business, really, in the seed side, clearly anything that's technology that's going to help us enhance yield and drive the yield potential of all the crops that we grow is still important. Going to your question about what we're not interested in, probably single gene-driven agronomic traits are probably not going to make it to the market. So you're looking at much more integrated breeding, multigenic traits, molecular breeding, and enhancing that aspect of yield is probably where a lot of the companies are going. Gene editing tools that was mentioned earlier, clearly, what are the potential candidates for that can truly be impactful in terms of driving reliable, sustainable, sort of consistent yield is always an issue for us, something that is not going to be variable across climates or years. That's a large factor that's been difficult to get to. In terms of crop protection molecules, we continue to look for selective herbicides, selective insecticides, and fungicides that have reduced the resistance, that resistance doesn't occur very quickly to. So those are things that, in the ag industry, we're always interested in, we're always looking for, and that hasn't changed. But maybe some of the technologies in terms of how we develop them and the options to get them to market are changing, evolving with everything new that's coming out there.
Question?
I'm Induru Pasara, a founder and the CEO of Fruit Vaccine Incorporated. Are you interested in plants used in medical technologies?
So what technology?
Medical technologies, particularly vaccine related, if possible.
That's not currently my space, so I won't say much about it. We did have animal vaccines that we tried to deliver 20 years ago, and it did not work for us. So we've kind of backed away from that technology.
So we've spent a lot of time on the panel talking best practices. What are some things that you've experienced that cause you and your colleagues to just shut down if a company does, says, brings to the table?
I think the two things for me are, one, having no idea what you want to do with your product, your technology, or your company, and just bringing that, but not knowing what you want to do. And then second, just absolutely outlandish valuations of what you have. I think that can shut down a conversation really, really quickly. So make sure you've done your homework when you do get to that point, because it can, like I said, it can just kill the conversation very, very fast.
Self-awareness is key in that regard of valuation. Know what value you're bringing, and have some good examples of that value. Large valuations or large prices to run small research protocols have a tendency to be off-putting. The other thing is know where you are in the conversation. Don't come in and just immediately start talking M&A. That's not how we do business. Having gone through the process, I can tell you, you don't just walk in and go, wow, we think this is something you should buy. That's a bad way to start the conversation. So be conscious of where you are in the conversation with the larger company, and be fairly self-aware with the value you're bringing, and know where you are. And if you're hustling, know you're hustling. Own it. Don't be too sure of yourself, but show the value that you believe you can bring, even if you're still trying to vet the value, but be honest about that. Say, I am trying to prove this value. We know it's there, but that self-awareness element is key.
Is there any different way that our entrepreneurs should approach you if they're looking at you as a potential channel to a grower versus an internal user of their technology?
Help me understand what's the value of us being a channel to the grower.
I guess maybe more towards Barrett, where some of, a company might approach climate to, say, be integrated into their software package.
Yeah, I mean, we have a whole platform group, which can be found on the website. So getting access to say, hey, we're thinking about being a platform partner. They're going to ask key questions about, RESTful APIs and the tech side of things to make sure that you have a backbone that could be reliably implemented. I mean, again, the other thing we're going to ask is customers you've worked with. If you're brand new, you're not quite a platform partner. But with the state of where the development is, of the company, warm introductions are always the best way to go. I mean, you can get access, especially to platform, because our goal there is to bring in new technologies. So cold emails will work. Don't be afraid of them. But, the job is to get warm introductions. That's the job in raising money. That's the job in finding partnerships. If a climate colleague comes up to me and says, hey, there's this new water technology that we heard pitch. I talked to the entrepreneurs. They sound really great. Would you meet with them? The obvious answer is yes, right? Because my Monsanto or climate colleague told me they heard good things. If I get an email, I still might want to talk to the company. It's not that I don't. It's that we have other things we're looking at and just might not have the time, and so you kind of fall to the bottom of the list. So warm introductions are really key at gaining that traction, unless, of course, the company has an initiative of partnering with companies that are, out of the starting gate, but maybe not that far along that they're still gaining, widespread market traction. So then you can engage directly with like a platform piece where that's the objective of that unit, is to find new technologies. And honestly, the best way to do that then is to come to forums like this, where we hear about technologies, and I go back to Rishi and I say, hey, Rishi, I heard about these companies. These are going to be great platform partners. And then, generally we'll call you, is often how it'll work. I mean, don't be afraid to call us, but that's the idea if you have an open collaborative platform like that. Otherwise, warm introductions, as much as you can.
So we're down to about our last 5 minutes on the panel. Any final questions from the floor before I ask our panelists to provide their final thoughts? All right, well, Simran, I'll let you lead off on final thoughts.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you all for coming here today. This is really a worthwhile place for us to come because you are here. So thank you again for that. And I thank Laura, you and Roger for putting a venue together like this, because this is important to us. It does help us a lot to see some of the companies that are here, to learn about you, and we use these forums a lot. So again, thank you for being here, and thank you for all you do, and all the best.
Yeah, I know as an alum of the university, I wish a lot of this was here when I was here, but it was still growing at that point. But I think the key thing to take away is there's no single unified approach to how you're going to go to a company. It's key to understanding where you are as a startup, whether you're a product, and then know what that company you're going to. I think someone said it earlier, do your homework on them. Make sure you know who they are and what they're about so that you can tailor and guide that presentation to them. And if you can find the person that will do the work for you on the inside, good things can happen.
I'd also like to thank everyone for coming, and the organizers for allowing me to come and present and represent climate. And the message, whether you're a professor, student, grad student, it doesn't matter. Keep hustling. Like that's the vision, that's the goal, that's the dream. The work is all there really is. I mean, anybody who's had successes or failures will tell you that it's all in the work, right? The hustling, the time spent building the company, the collaborating with the team. So treasure that part of building the company. Sometimes it can be hard, but that's really what you're here to do. Take advantage of the resources that a place like this has to offer, both at the university level, the student body level. Take advantage of your time here to really incubate great ideas, to try and bring those to market, and just every day think about how you can out-hustle the next guy or gal. Like that's the goal.
So I would encourage you to take our panelists at their word, both the industry panelists, the investor panelists, the grower panelists. They're interested in having conversations with you. For the ones that are still around, try and find some time in one of the breaks to ask them a question that maybe you didn't want to ask in front of everyone else. Look for that warm lead that might lead to a conversation and a partnership and potentially an investment or an eventual acquisition. All of that starts with that introductory conversation. With that, please join me in thanking our panelists for their time and insights.